I'm happiest in the saddle.
A fellow sportsman.
I am an FBI agent!
Great Scott!
What do you say we cut the chit-chat? A-hole!
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
Come with me if you want to live.
Hello, and welcome to Retro Ramble, or should I say Recent Ramble. I am Charlie McGhee.
I am George McGhee.
And of course, we call them Recent Rambles because rather than going back to the films of our youth, which is the purpose of our Retro Ramble podcast, this is where George and I take a look at a film of today. Isn't that right, George?
That is correct, brother.
And so similar rules apply in that we will try and bring our wit and our bad impressions. But the fact is we are still watching the same sort of films that we watched when we were younger. We just don't have as many memories about them. And this time we are going to be taking a look at 2021's Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat!
Release techno. So for those of you who listen to our usual podcast, you may recall that way back in episode 46, we covered, is it 1995, George?
It is, indeed.
Yeah, the 1995 classic, one of the best, I think, video game to movie films there is, and because back then there was a lot of really bad ones.
And then there've been a lot of bad ones since as well.
And they're still making bad ones. So, but it stood out. We had a lot of fun going back to that, and I think we'll refer to that today. But yeah, today we are talking about a film that's just come out recently. If you're listening to this now, it's early summer 2021. George, I guess we should probably give some form of disclaimer because we're going to not spoil this, but we are going to be talking about pretty much what's in the trailer. We're going to be talking about what we feel about it. So if people don't want to know anything, they should probably pause the podcast and come back later, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, unlike our usual Retro Ramble episodes, we're not going to go into such heavy detail because it is a new film. We do try and avoid spoilers wherever possible. However, I think we would both sort of recommend, if you haven't seen the film, go and watch the film. It's available to download on premium rentals, or get to your local cinema if you can, and come back. But we don't reveal any massive spoilers, but we do go into some detail on the film. Yeah, as Charlie says, it'll be the usual sort of Retro Ramble treatment of we'll share our thoughts, we'll share a bit of production background, but it won't be as detailed. So it's a shorter episode this time round.
Yeah, we weren't able to watch this on the couch with Glendillings. We just streamed this, bought this, watched it on Apple, whatever.
Frustratingly, we weren't even able, obviously because of Charlie and I are in different countries, we weren't able to see this together. And I think we would have, in normal pre-pandemic situations, it is one of those films that we would have made an effort to watch together.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So yeah, here it is, our thoughts on Mortal Kombat 2021. Enjoy the show.
Enjoy.
First learned about this 7 years ago on a mission in Brazil to capture a wanted fugitive. When we got there, it tore through our unit in seconds. The target had superhuman abilities. It had the same marking you do, Cole.
It's a birthmark.
What do you mean?
He was born with it.
It's not a birthmark, Cole. It means you've been chosen.
Throughout history, different cultures all over the world reference a great tournament of champions. That dragon marking? I think it's an invitation to fight for something known. As Mortal Kombat.
These are your champions.
I'm Sonya. That's Kano.
I'm Liu Kang.
Name's Jax.
Kung Lao.
Lord Raiden.
The fate of Earth is in our hands.
No matter how many of my people you put in the ground, we will will not fail. Kill them.
I am Sub-Zero. Get over here!
Kano wins. You fucking beauty.
So, Joel, I mean, I normally ask at this point in our normal episodes, I ask you, how did we get this film way back when? But this is 2021. I guess this film was probably put together pre-pandemic, or was it during? I don't know if you can answer that question.
It's actually had quite a lengthy production background. So, because we did talk about it on our Mortal Kombat 1995 episode. So that was roughly about a year ago. I think it was around maybe January, February last year, 2020. We recorded that episode. So if you haven't listened to it, check it out. We had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, so as we talked in our suspicious spin-offs section of Mortal Kombat 1995, there's been loads of spin-offs and web series, TV series, animated features. So that there's been so much extra. There's, the Mortal Kombat it's a proper franchise. The games have continued to be churned out, over 30 plus years. So obviously there was the Mortal Kombat 1995. There was the dreadful Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which was 1997. And apparently there was plans to make a third film, but then they saw the audience and critical reception to Annihilation, and that was shelved. But then there was always rumors and attempts to make either a third Mortal Kombat film or a rebooted, but then there was, as I say, web series and things like that. I think it was Mortal Kombat Legacy that I haven't seen. So it has kind of gone through various different iterations. And I think this latest reboot, which is produced by James Wan, who is the sort of genius producer director behind the Conjuring series and Sinister and all those sort of like horror shared universes. He's a bit of a sort of a go-to guy at Warner Brothers, the same way Jon Favreau is at Disney. James Wan is one of their sort of key creative minds and, oversees a few different projects. He was also, I think James Wan did the Aquaman movie as well. So he's got his fingers in a lot of pies. So he produces it. But it's a new director, a bit like Paul W.S. Anderson was for Mortal Kombat 95. His background, Simon McCoy, is in TV commercials. So, as many people have started. So Ridley and Tony Scott, Michael Bay, there's quite a few people have started their background in commercials. But I think it's been in rough production for about at least 5 years.
That makes sense to me because you see, obviously, one of the main characters is the guy from he is in the Raid, isn't he?
He's in the first Raid. Joe Taslim is in the first Raid movie.
Brilliant. And he's in the other one. Is it The Night Comes for Us?
That is a fantastic film that more people need to see. It's on Netflix. If you like your
brutalities.
It's probably one of the goriest action films I've ever seen. It's borderline horror movie type of gore, but it's a kung fu action film.
But I think it kind of lets it sorts you out in the first 5 minutes. It's like, this is what you've come to expect. But
it's very stabby.
Yeah, stab. You thought you could stab your problems away. So I think you can't talk about. It always comes back to the game. I think you can't talk about. We talked about when we covered the 1995 film. We have a lot of fond memories of that. But that film came into production because of the bombastic arrival of this game. And I think that's why it's become the franchise that it is, because it landed with such a punch, pun intended, that there were these fatalities, that it was breaking all the rules when it arrived. I can remember, I've talked about this in the episode, I'll repeat myself again, but I was very much target. I was 13 years old or something when the games came out, and one of our friends had it. We were over there for a birthday party, like you'd imagine a VHS thing, and the parents all had to have a chat to say they were okay for people to play on it and stuff. And yeah, I think it made such an impact. I think that's why we have the franchise still today, because it's like, it's Mortal Kombat, it's the fatalities, it's the special moves, it's breaking that whole thing that the cartoon aspect of Street Fighter and Virtua Fighter and all these other, and Tekken, that it was like the one game that sort of bridged the gap between violent action movies of the era before, rather than making it all cartoonesque. So, and it's because of the game that we've got this film 2021, because the game is where it is today. Can you shed some light on that, George? Because I'd say that a lot of the reason behind this film is the fact that it's still such a relevant franchise today in the gaming world.
Yeah, it's weird to think that the original film, 1995 film, I think by that point there'd only been Mortal Kombat 2 had been out for a few years. I don't think the third one had even come out at that point. It might have done.
After the movie. But I think in between Annihilation and Mortal Kombat.
So it's interesting that, yeah, pretty much 25 years later, we're now up to Mortal Kombat 11.
Well, it's kind of 12 now, because it's like they just updated 11 from last year with some more DLC, haven't they?
Yes, so both you and I mean, you are a much bigger gamer than I am, but I've been playing Mortal Kombat 11 recently, and I'm playing story mode, and I'm like, what's going on? I have no idea what's going on, but I'm really enjoying it. The visuals are amazing. Like when I was playing it, my wife walked in and was like, are you playing a game or is this a film? I was like, no, it's a game. It's just really shit hot graphics.
Is this a horror film? Are you watching some gore porn?
So yeah, but to think there's been so much mythology. I say there's been comics, there's been so many characters introduced in that 20-year period. So, but yeah, the games have had a bit of a dip, and I think it's safe to say we haven't played every single Mortal Kombat game. We played the first 3 games quite religiously. Then when the new sort of PlayStation, consoles came out, we played a lot of Tekken. And then it's kind of sort of came back in the sort of late noughties. Is that safe to say? Like Mortal Kombat 9, are we saying? Is that when it kind of found its mojo again?
Yeah, I mean, it snuck up. I think I obviously knew of its existence, but when you saw it getting referenced in the 40-Year-Old Virgin,
yes.
So that was like 2008, 2009, and you've got, is it Seth
Rogen?
Seth Rogen and Paul, the guy who never gets old.
Paul Rudd. He's very dreamy.
Then playing that and having this brilliant, I know you're gay because you listen to Coldplay. It's a very funny scene, but it was like, wow, it's so cinematic, and it had really come back. And I think I was like, I have to play this game again. I really need to check it out, because I think part of you thinks, can you grow out of a fighting game now that you haven't got your mates next to you on the sofa? You're playing strangers online, and they found ways to keep it interesting, and they have massively beefed up the story. And there's all of these characters, and this, if you've played the games, these stories. And I think that's why you probably, if you're seriously into these games and you are aware of the whole universe that's been built around, a lot this film that's come out will probably make a lot more sense. But they do some new things. So I think before we go into any more detail, is there anything else you want to talk about on the production side of things, George? I
mean, yeah, in terms of it's an interesting approach, because it's I'd say it's probably I'm trying to see let's see if I've got the details of its rough budget, because it'll be interesting to see. I think it's a fairly low budget, in all honesty. I'm seeing if it says here, according to Wikipedia, 55 million budget, which in
standards,
if you think the average summer blockbuster is minimum these days 200 million, that is a very cheap movie, and you rarely get films of that budget anymore. It's either a very, very low budget or 100 million plus, and I think it's quite evident because of the cast. I
think that's the only thing that shows up. There are some actors we know from our love of the genre itself, but there's a lot of people who won't know anyone in this film.
Yeah, there's no real stars to speak of, and even think of back to the original 1995 film. Christophe Lambert was your biggest star. He wasn't on the poster. It was all about the game as the that IP as the recognition, and it's the same in this. That it's everyone knows what Mortal Kombat is, so you don't really need to sell it on its actors, but they have picked wisely by picking fan favorites like Joe Taslim, who is a brilliant martial artist. And again, it's very much history repeating itself. It's a very unknown cast. It's an unknown director. So yeah, I think it was all filmed in Australia, and I think that's a lot of the cast Australian by Orange. I was definitely getting hints of Liu Kang's Australian accent coming through, even though I don't think he is a native Australian. I think he spent a lot of time in Australia. And because you've
softly spoken.
It's very. Well, that was one of my issues about. We'll get into it, but I don't know if I mentioned it in the main review. I think Liu Kang, I found him quite softly spoken and maybe a bit too camp and not very. I mean, maybe I'm just used to Liu Kang being the strong leader and having amazing hair.
And if you want to listen to us wax lyrical about the actor who played Liu Kang in the 90s and how ripped he is, because that's what the thing is, I think how this guy got the role is like, okay, so are you in Australia? Yeah, I'm in Australia. Are you seriously ripped and Asian? He's like, okay, you can play the role.
So, yeah, I mean, I say it's an Australian production, and I think there's lots of, the same in the UK, there's lots of filming incentives to film in Australia, so that's why quite a few people do it. And there are plans, to turn this into, a proper franchise. Joe Taslim has revealed that he signed up for 4 movies.
Brilliant.
He would love to do a prequel exploring Sub-Zero's origins, and each character has got so much history, so there is a lot of potential for them to go different places. But yeah, obviously we can talk about our thoughts on the film when we get into the main review.
Yeah, well, do you want to dive into it now?
Yeah, let's dive into it.
Okay. So, George, we just covered off the production chat. I think it's probably a good place to talk about our friend. I think it's Hiroyuki Sanada. I forgot his name earlier, but he is our man. This is, I think, what's he called, Hanzo in this film. But it starts off, he's just trying to make a nice life. He's got servants, he's got guards, nothing to read into there. And then, for some unknown reason, there's this man turns up to ruin his life. But it's a great opening scene.
No, it's a fantastic opening, and yeah, as you say, it really draws you in. It's beautifully shot. I think this is some of the best cinematography and some of the best fighting, I would say. I think it's probably one of the film's biggest strengths is this opening sort of 10-15 minutes.
I think you've got to understand where this film lies, in terms of we've been spoiled with there's the John Wick type violence in action films. We've had the glossy, family-friendly Marvel sort of things. And I think this somehow sits in the middle because there's a bit of mystery. Obviously, fans will know exactly who these two are. But to anybody else watching this film, it's like, hey, there's just some guy who's like pretty well skilled in martial arts getting beaten up with a guy who's got magic ice hands. But I think this for me was like Crouching Tiger turned up to 11 with Mortal Kombat thrown in. I was just immediately hooked. And I think all of the fans, I think any fan would be in watching this film. It's just such a great opening fight. Not the CGI is not too present because we know that they're using CGI a lot more in fights, but it's not too heavy.
It's quite funny though. You can see that Warner Brothers could see its strength as well because they released the first 7 minutes of the film free to watch on YouTube and it's run up to release. So just to get people excited, and it's obviously like, you enjoying this? Then watch the rest of the movie. So yeah, it's a fantastic start. I say Joe Taslim and Hiroyuki
Sanada.
Sanaga is. Yeah, they're both great actors. Obviously, Joe Taslim's an amazing martial artist as well. So it's a very strong start. And yeah, even if my knowledge of the Mortal Kombat lore isn't great, I've just started playing MK11, and I'm playing catch up. But even if you have the slightest knowledge of Mortal Kombat, it's that rivalry between Sub-Zero and Scorpion has always been a recurring theme throughout the games.
Well, yeah, and in the more recent, the MK11, he's introduced as his name. It's like the fact he's a ninja and stuff like that. And that was not present when we were playing the games when we were younger. But I just love the way it's set. It's this beautiful woodland setting. That's why it feels very Crouching Tiger. It's like ancient Japan. You've got this thing going on where, Sub-Zero's
talking Chinese, and he's like,
I was going to say
I
that
don't understand you, but I know you're an enemy. And it's like this brilliant things like martial arts or fighting is the language that, you don't need language to understand a foe is an attack is incoming.
No, that was it was a point I was going to raise. It's a very minor point, but it's a real bugbear in so many films where people will be talking in their language and you might get subtitles, or the worst bugbear is when people are talking in English to each other when they would just be talking in their native language.
Like those war films where all the Nazis are talking English to each other because they're worried people won't watch the film with subtitles.
Exactly, and that's why I love that attention to detail of this guy speaking in Chinese, this guy speaking in Spanish, and it helps deepen that. They're from different tribes, they're from different clans, and what have you. But I thought it was a very simple touch that I think more films should make the effort to do.
It is a weird choice to go for the garden trowel, though. For me, anyway, I'm not going to
go with what's handy. Go with what's handy.
But no, it's a very strong opening scene, and I think it could be revisited. Later on, it's so far back, and then we jump forward to present day.
Mm-hmm.
It's the latest
Joe, what's his name, MMA fighter.
Yeah. MMA, UFC. It's like what's the common denominator for martial arts? It's like I just remember do you remember in the 90s when guys were doing the splits? No, it's MMA, and I think it's good that kind of like James Bond, like what's current.
Yeah,
I got a bit of a feel for that. I kind of liked him. Then you're kind of wondering, okay, so it's taking a lot from the first film. There's going to be an introduction of characters. It was interesting.
There's a lot of exposition, and I think that's the problem with this, because adapting the game, and it's a bigger problem for this film than it is the 1995 film, because there's now 30 years of backstory to deal with and characters, rather than when the 1990 film came out. I think Mortal Kombat 2 might have come out, so you might have had maybe 12 characters, and now I think there's approximately 80. So there's a lot of stuff to cover, and I can understand why they've distilled it down, and you've got talking about the Netherrealm, and you've got to have that Sonya and Jax doing the exposition, and apparently like it has been picked up. Like I was reading an interview with Simon McCoy, and they're saying, why have you created this? You've got so many characters to pick from. Why have you created this new? Is he called Cole Tan? Why have you created this new MMA character? And he's like, well, each iteration gets some new characters. It's a Mortal Kombat tradition. We felt we wanted a new audience to be, as a way to bring new audiences to the story. So it's seeing it through his eyes, and that's the challenge again with this film, is that you're going to have the diehard fans who know everything, but you also need to make it appealing to Joe Public.
Well, for me, it keeps the film mysterious, because you and I know enough about this franchise that I was like, so is he going to become Scorpion? So it keeps you guessing right until the end, and we're not going to spoil anything here. I think it's handled very well, and there's this definite payoff. I think, let's talk about this film's highlights, why you need to watch this film, because you've never seen Mortal Kombat represented like this on the big screen. We've got all of the graphical processing that's been learned from the recent Marvel films, all that technology shared, and the CGI in this, for the most part, is top notch. And just like the recent games, they know who they're catering to. They do not hold back. And we finally get to see the fatalities and the brutalities that we love, that are so, freakishly gorish, that shock you in the game. You get that in this film in parts, and it's not overused. So that's the good. I think, just to touch a little bit on the not so good parts, is maybe you could blame other films that have come out in the last few years, this need to maybe try and build a longer story, to think of a franchise, is the fact that they can't just jump in. They could have made one complete film bringing in the entire Mortal Kombat story, but a lot of it is kept. They're like, no, there's enough. Let's make what's the word I'm looking for? Is it a confined storyline?
Yeah.
Whereas I think it works. But I wasn't convinced about the tutorial part. That wasn't in the first film so much. The first film was just about them getting on a boat, enter the dragon style, and getting there, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. And you had
they didn't have to learn to fight.
Lambert and his exposition.
Yeah, they didn't have to find this Ankara or whatever it is, their special weapon.
Arcana.
They were the finished article, and I liked that. And I thought it was used well in this film. I didn't like the fact they gave the MacGuffin a name.
Yeah.
I think it would have been, they could have said enough by just going, and once again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but what's it called? Is it an Ankara?
Arcana.
Arcana. So everyone basically has one of these, and it's essentially the special moves, and you either know it or you discover it. And I think it was too much focused on that. It's like you're watching a fighting computer game turned into a film. Just give us more of the fighting.
Yeah. I think it's a difficult one because yes, you've got so many characters, you've got so much mythology, and the stuff that works in video games that just, even though these games are getting
you can't go from one fight to another fight. But it has to be storyline.
No, but there's so many fantastical characters and silly stuff, and whilst these games are getting more cinematic, there's certain stuff that just doesn't translate to screen. So you do have to simplify it. You do have to simplify it for new audiences. And so I can see why they've done this Arcana thing. But I agree with you. I've got it in my notes. One of the things I didn't like is the Arcana MacGuffin. The fact that, okay, yes, it's fine. It makes sense for discovering mythical special powers, like you can use fire, you can use ice, things like that. But growing metal arms and growing a laser eye is a mythical power. I was just like, that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, they're pushing it out there. I think there's more. I think what I felt by the time I got to the end of this film, like, you have to see this film, you have to go and check it out if you're a fan. But like, there would have been a more elegant way to do it. You could have said that. What I did like about the fact that they've all got the tattoo, that they're just, that dragon on my arm, I was born with that. You have been chosen. But if you die, whoever kills you will get it. It's like, you have been chosen unless you die. I thought that worked well, but I think there was a more elegant way that they could have come, because there is this thing, because of, I would say, these fighting games' origins coming from where they do, from comic book, the manga element. Everyone's got to have a special weapon. You can't just kick and punch. You've got to have a Haruken, or you've got to have like laser fists or firearms or stealing people's soul. It's got to be something else. And so that doesn't, it's like, okay, well, the film is going to be completely fantastical then, rather than, they didn't really have to deal with that with Street Fighter, did they? They're just like, I mean, I don't think anyone really had.
No, but it's one of those weird things that the films, like the Street Fighter film, just kind of talks around.
They fail that. They try to make it a bit too realistic, Street Fighter.
Yeah. And they kind of do it in the 1995 Mortal Kombat, that just all of a sudden, at the end, Liu Kang's kicking ass, and then he kind of does this fireball thing. But it kind of makes sense because he's from the warrior monk sort of tribes.
But it is, they don't really push it. They're like, we can't. We're not going to be able to sell that in 1995. Today, they're like, you've seen Lord of the Rings by now. You've seen Game of the Thrones. This guy's got ice hands.
So yeah, I think the things I loved, I thought, some great fights and choreography. It's definitely made with a lot of love and respect for the fans, for a lot of nods to the games. I loved like the little move, the little bit in the training where Liu Kang's just sweeping the leg.
Yeah.
And so little bits there. But yeah, it definitely feels like it's lacking the warmth and charm of the 1990 film. So you had, in the 1995 film, even though woefully miscast and, not casting a proper, authentic Asian actor, you have Christopher Lambert as Lord Raiden. At least he brought a bit of humour and warmth to the role. You had Lyndon Ashby, who was brilliant as Johnny Cage. Kari Tagawa as the amazingly menacing and hammy Shang Tsung. And I don't think the guy from The Dark Knight playing Shang Tsung in this is anywhere near effective. I think he's a bit just meh
He looks angry. The problem I have with him, one, he looks angry. Two, he doesn't look very hard. And three, he is not nearly enough interested, like creepily, in Sonya. Like
Sonya Blade.
Sonya. I thought it was funny how Jax kept referring to her by a second name. And I was like, he keeps on going, Blade. And I'm like, Wesley Snipes is going to jump out of nowhere.
At least Wesley.
Because he's got Blade.
I thought, though, on the flip side of other characters, I thought Kano was definitely the MVP in this film. I thought he was brilliant.
Yeah, he's brilliant, and I get the feeling he's been given that role. And did he make it his own? Was he meant to be comedy relief? But yeah,
well, I read somewhere that the reason that they decided not to include Johnny Cage in this because they felt that it was all like Kano just took up too much of that role of comic relief,
annoying Sonya,
and a big personality essentially. So it makes sense. But yeah, I thought he was brilliant.
Well, he's got the best arc in the film.
He's got the best arc. He's got the best lines.
He knows everyone, and he comes out with his lines. So I think. I think in terms of summarizing this film, I guess this is a 2021. This is what a 2021 video game to film adaptation looks like. The effects are amazing.
For the most part, there's a little bit of iffy VFX.
Well, I think without ruining it, I think they finally sort out the reptile thing. I think they give reptile some justice compared to the 1995 atrocity.
A Muppet would make, you know.
One thing we have to talk about, George, even we were talking about the amazing opening scene earlier, set in ancient Japan before Japan's long time ago.
Feudal Japan.
Feudal Japan, still got techno music, or 2021's idea. In all of the fights, it's there. Did you not notice that?
I think it's a brilliant soundtrack by Benjamin Wallfish, who was co-composer on Blade Runner 2049 with Hans Zimmer.
But it's not techno, but it's like the most modern version of techno.
No, but he brilliantly weaves in the techno track that we love so much, and that I was ready to write to my MP if they hadn't included it in the new film. But it's very cleverly woven into the soundtrack.
But even in the earlier scenes in ancient Japan, I love it from the offset. It's like Mortal Kombat.
It doesn't have the bellowing.
It doesn't have somebody shouting Mortal Kombat every 10 minutes.
But it does have one of my pet hates, and I think they do it in the original, and it's almost like the Harry Potter thing that whenever somebody appears on screen, they introduce themselves a full name, like, I am Liu Kang, or, oh, look, it's Kung Lao, my cousin. And it's like, oh, God, can we not just... And it's because you have to introduce these characters, but surely there's a more elegant way of doing it. I am no longer, what's he called? I am now Sub-Zero. Oh, okay.
Okay, well, what happened in between? We'll never know. Okay. Yeah, no, I think it's like that thing that we talked about maybe on the podcast before. It's like, why doesn't nobody ever says goodbye on a phone call in a film? Because from a mood point of view, it's like, it's wasted minutes. Just edit it out.
Nobody ever goes to the toilet.
Nobody ever goes to the toilet, and they always edit out goodbye. So everyone just hangs up phone calls. And I think it's like that. You could say, "Oh, Lou, yeah, what's that, Lao or Kung? Does he call him Kung?"
Cousin. Well, yeah, you touched on that earlier in terms of Sub-Zero and his backstory. So it's.
What's he doing?
I think one of the main gripes about this film is the fact that it's a Mortal Kombat film and there isn't technically a tournament. And again, I think it's a conscious choice of the filmmakers and writers, because it's like it's going to massively impact your storytelling. You've got so many characters to introduce, and then you've got a tournament to go through. So yes, it's very much setting things up.
Yeah, it's merely a portal.
Yes, there's obviously teasers in this to introduce other characters, and I thought that was quite funny. Like, a lot of the baddies that they're fighting, I wasn't very familiar with. I was like, oh, they're just fodder because you want to save the better guys for the sequels.
Yeah, I think they've clearly been a bit more confident with this, or should I say aware, in that there's not a lot of room in today's movie making industry for, one-hit wonders. So you're going to make a Mortal Kombat film? Give us a 3, and I'm sure Netflix are like that with series now. What's the 3 film franchise? Give us a 3 film franchise. You shits. No, I do get that feeling. So it's like you couldn't. That's why they stayed away from the fact. That's why more. We're not going to spoil what goes on. There's not more characters, so we don't get all of them. And they could have taken half of that and had a very concise film, but they're drip feeding us, And I'm going to go watch the next one. Look at it that way. Job done. From that perspective, I want to see the next film.
And I'd happily watch this again. I mean, I think it's. I think it's on par with the 1995 film. I mean, obviously, I have a lot of nostalgia for the 1995 film. I think there are some things that it does better. In terms of the core characters, I think you're more engaged with the heroes in the original than you are with this one. But this has some great fights. There's a lot of love, and I'm definitely on board to watch more of it. And I think even though it doesn't get into the tournament, I think it gives you enough of the fights, of the mythology, that it works.
I put this, because I think I said at the start to compare this to the first. The other two films, the Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Don't talk about Annihilation.
Yeah, well, this is way better. This is obviously better than Annihilation, but for me, it's not as good as the first film because obviously I'm not the same age. It doesn't mean the same to me. But I also think, I know that the sequel to this won't be as bad as Annihilation. At least I hope it won't be.
Brother, you're alive. Too bad you will die.
And I think they got a lot of things right, but they've had a lot of time to prepare. I think the reason why I think the original still stands up, it's the original, first time giving it a go. It was good, and when we reviewed it on Retro Ramble, we enjoyed, and there's a lot of it that still works. And I think if you were to watch one film after another, you were like, okay, this more recent event, this more recent film is more modern, it looks better. It's slicker type thing, but it doesn't surpass the original. But they might give us. I think if they're going to get another film and maybe at least make a trilogy out of this, you could be a satisfied Mortal Kombat fan. Is what I'm feeling from what I've seen of this film. I think they've made a good start. If it's a franchise, it's just one of those things you have to accept now that.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one, though, and I don't know if we talked about this previously, because of the current situation, because it's been spread across this, premium video on demand and the simultaneous release, it's hard to tell if it's deemed as, has it washed its face? Has it been deemed
trust me, the studios know. The studios know exactly how much it's been. They don't know how much it's been pirated, but they know how much it's been watched, how much it's been downloaded, how much.
No, but I'm saying I don't know. I'm assuming. I think it's done fairly well. Considering, and the reviews weren't too. I mean, very middling reviews, but I don't think anyone was overly harsh on it. And
no one slated it. No, I can say that. I mean, obviously, I always do that before we cover a film. I check to see what everyone else has said. I just look at the ratings.
Yeah.
Nobody slated this. This hasn't. It's been majority reviews like 50, 60, 5 to 7 out of 10. Not that we do numbers on this podcast.
And it seems like it's kind of split opinions in the general public as well. I've spoken to people that have really enjoyed it for what it is, and then some people are just like, oh no, it's terrible. But it's I think it does a lot right. If you're a fan of the games, I think you will get some enjoyment out.
Yeah, going back to that five laugh test thing I mentioned earlier, if you're a fan of Mortal Kombat, there is enough in this film to make it a worthwhile watch.
Yeah,
especially some of the fatalities. So good to see those on the screen.
Definitely.
So yeah, that was a recent ramble on Mortal Kombat 2021. Retro Ramble will be back. George, can we let the listeners know what we're going to be covering on our next episode? We just don't know when it's coming out. But anyway, stay tuned. Thank you for listening. Anything else you want to mention?
No, just thank you for listening. As always, if you've got time, please Leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. Share with a friend, a like-minded soul, and get in touch if you have any thoughts, comments, or films you want us to cover.
Or if your podcast platform has fallen into the Netherrealm, our blog is up there forever. It's retroramble.blog, and every single one of our episodes is up there to listen, stream directly for free whenever you want. So thank you for listening. I've been Charlie McGhee.
I've been George McGhee.
And we'll be back next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.